thought I would come on here to show you my new piece of jewelry that I have. I ran my half marathon, and this is the medal. It looks really cool, and it's huge, which is one of my favorite parts about half marathons, is the medals are just giant. It makes you feel like you did something really remarkable. I was going to add this to the end of my last video, but it ended up being a little bit longer than I wanted it to be, and so I decided just to make a whole separate video about the race itself and like what happened immediately before, what was going on during, and what was happening after. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm really excited to share this with you. Okay, so here's the story, because it's pretty crazy. Thursday, the day after my last check-in in the previous video, I wake up and I realize that I either have really bad allergies or whatever illness my husband had the week before, I now have. I woke up with kind of like a tickly throat and a lot of congestion and some mucus, which is all very fun. The next day was packet pickup day, Friday, or St. Patrick's Day, and I go into the store to pick up my packet, and they don't have my number. So less than 24 hours before the race starts, I get a brand new number. It ended up being fine though, because the app that I was using to or the app that my husband and my dad was using to track me during the race was based off of my phone's GPS, not my bib number and the GPS inside the bib. So it ended up being okay. But when that happened, I was just like, is the whole world against me? Like, I'm sick, and then they don't have my number, and I know that it's forecasted to be aggressively cold. But then Saturday morning came. I woke up about 5:30. The race started at 7:45. And I just wanted to make sure that I had enough time for my body to wake up, for me to go to the bathroom and get all that stuff done, to hydrate, to make sure I eat a good amount before the race starts. And I wake up and the first thing I do is check the weather. And it was like 10 degrees outside, but there was a 20-mile-an-hour wind. And so the real feel was like -10. Now, I know the real feel isn't the most accurate, and the different websites said different things, but the range of the real feel temperatures was from -2 to -10. So not only am I sick, I also have bronchitis. It's also freezing outside, like devastatingly freezing outside, and I'm trying to get a PR in the half marathon. Like, I about lost my mind on Saturday morning, and I talked to Keller. We were having a powwow during breakfast while I was eating my Eggo waffles with peanut butter and syrup on them, because apparently my stomach really loves to run off of that, so that's what I decided to eat for my pre-race breakfast. And he was like, honestly, if you finish this, that's gonna be way more impressive than any particular time. Just the fact that you're still doing this is impressive. And actually, I've looked at the race results, and there were like 2.5 full pages of people that just didn't even start because it was so cold. And I don't blame them at all. I mean, it was freezing. I've never been so cold in my entire life than I was right before the race started. I mean, I was uncontrollably shivering. It was so cold. And so we have that conversation. I realize I need to change up what I'm wearing, because I don't think what I have planned is warm enough, and I was absolutely correct. I ended up doing just like leggings with pockets on the bottom, and then I had a Patagonia base layer. I had a fleece quarter zip, and then I had a windbreaker / rain jacket on top, and then I had my vest. And then for the first half of the race, I had a Columbia fleece on top of that. I had a hat, gloves, I had a buff on, I had socks that went over the bottom of my tights so that my ankles were covered. I tried to cover like every bit of skin that I could to try and prevent any sort of frostbite or, damage to my lungs from the cold. And the plan was that if I got warm, I could just take off the fleece Columbia and hand it to my husband. And I did end up doing that, and it worked out perfectly because on the way out, it was kind of a modified out and back course. On the way out, the wind was in our face. And on the way back, the wind was pushing us, which is the most ideal way for that to happen if you do have to run with a strong wind. But I knew I was going to be much warmer on the way back than I was on the way out. So that's why we kind of came up with the plan to have something over my hydration vest that I could very easily take off and hand to my husband or my dad. And so I figured out what I wanted to bring. I packed an extra bag. Keller got a quilt out to wrap around me when the race finished. I filled my little silicone water bottles. I got my gels. I made sure my earbuds were charged, my watch was charged, and it was ready to head downtown to the start line. Now at this point, I had all of those layers on that I just mentioned, and then my winter coat on top of it all. I was so, I can't even explain to you how freezing I was. The moment I stepped out of the car, I just didn't stop moving. Because if I stopped moving at all, I would start uncontrollably shivering because my body was just so cold. And at this point, I had an A, B, C, and D goal. My A goal was still to run a sub 2-hour half marathon. My B goal was still to run a sub 2:10. My C goal was to get a PR, and my D goal was to just finish. To just finish the race. But what was really amazing is, what I love about races and why I was so excited to do this one and why I'm so excited for the marathon that I'm now doing in May is there's such a camaraderie amongst all of the runners. It doesn't matter if you're an elite runner or if you are going to walk the entire half marathon. We were all just trying to cheer each other up, and we were telling jokes, and we were, doing these weird shivering dances together to try and warm ourselves up. And I'm really happy that I ended up being in that environment before the race started, because my mindset when that gun went off was I was in a much better place. I was a lot happier. I was a lot more excited than I was at 5:30 that morning when I looked at the weather. And so the race starts. The corral is really tiny. So right after the gun went off, I was still walking for another probably a minute and a half. And then I ran over the little carpet that interacts with the race bib, which starts your time officially. And then I started my watch. I started the GPS tracker on my phone so that my husband and my dad could follow me and give me aid when I needed it and cheer me on. And we were off. And the first mile was very cold, 20-mile-an-hour winds in our face. And then eventually we kind of went into this trail that was a little bit lower, and so there were things kind of all around us that were higher than us, and so that was kind of breaking the wind a little bit. And honestly, the first 5K flew by. I didn't record anything during the race. I have one picture or a few pictures during the race that my dad took, but otherwise I just really wanted to focus on staying warm and staying moving. And I went into the race with a strategy that I was going to hang around the pacer. And so if you haven't run a half marathon or a marathon before, they usually have these people called pacers. And what they do is they'll hold up a sign that on one side says, how many minutes per mile are you planning on running? Like, what's your per mile pace going to be? And then on the other side, it has, this is what this like finish time is going to be. And so there was like a 2 hour and 10 minute pacer, and then there was a 1 hour and 55 minute pacer for the half marathon. And so I just decided, well, I don't need to stick with the 1 minute and 55 pacer, or the 1 hour and 55 minute pacer, but I want to keep him in sight. And that'll give me a good idea of how fast I'm going without having to look at my watch every 5 minutes, because looking at my watch means pulling up all the layers that were on top of it and also exposing some skin. And so my goal was to try and not look at my watch as much as possible and just follow this pacer. And that started out as a good idea. And then I noticed probably around mile 4 or 5 that I was past the pacer, and I was feeling really good. I didn't really feel like I needed to slow down in order to maintain the pace that I was running. And so I just decided, well, as long as I'm feeling like my breath is under control and like I'm, in a good sustainable pace, I'm just going to keep going, even if I'm running faster than this pacer. And what's crazy is I'm glad that I did that, because when I went around the hairpin turn to go back to the start and finish line, I saw his pacing sign in one of the garbage cans. And so he actually didn't end up finishing the race. So I'm really happy that I kind of stuck with my gut and how my body was feeling, and just decided to keep going at a pace that I thought was good. So then around mile 7, I do the hairpin turn and I'm going back, and I look at my watch. The sun is finally out. The wind is carrying me. It's feeling good. And I look at my watch and I realize that I'm on pace, and I'm actually under pace. And so I started thinking, like, I could do this. Like, I could get under 2 hours. As long as I maintain this pace and like keep hydrating and I stay on top of my nutrition during the race, like, I could actually do this. And throughout this whole time, mind you, my mom wasn't there in person because she had other plans, but she was using the RaceJoy app to send me cheers. And so like every probably 7 to 10 minutes, I'd get these hilarious bits of encouragement from my mom. And that definitely helped me keep a smile on my face throughout the race, even when it was really windy and really cold. It seemed like God told her when to send a cheer, because the points in the race where it was like the most brutal would be when she sent the most funny cheers. And so that was just really fun. After the race, she asked if I was annoyed, and I said, no. Like, it brought a smile to my face every single time. So that was really awesome. I had so much support from my family and my husband during the race. It was really, I'm so grateful for that. I don't know how anybody does that alone. But so I start to realize, like, I can actually do this. Like, my A goal is within reach. And so I just stuck to the pace. I just stuck to what was feeling good. I ended up taking off my fleece and I gave it to my husband, and my water bottle, like the nozzles were frozen, so I ended up having to get some water from my husband as well. They had water stops, but I try to avoid those just because those are points of congestion, and so sometimes that can mean tripping, sometimes it can mean slowing down, sometimes it can mean stepping wrong and, potentially like tweaking a muscle or a tendon or something. So I tried to avoid those if I could. I think I only did like one water stop from the race organizers during that whole race. And then around, I want to say it was maybe a 5K left, I checked my watch and I realized, like, I am healthily above schedule. I am healthily, like, I have a gap between my goal and where I'm at right now. And so the last 5K, I didn't take it easy, but I didn't feel the need to like speed up an insane amount, partially because I knew that the last mile was uphill, and also partially because I knew that the last mile was going to be wind in my face. And so I was running really steadily, but I was at the same time trying to conserve a little bit of energy because I knew that that last mile was going to be difficult. And I get to the last mile, it is just as difficult as I thought it was going to be. If you look at my like mile by mile pace, it's pretty even, except for there's 1 mile where I had to take a really, really quick bathroom break. So that one's quite a bit slower, but then most of them are pretty even. And then my last one goes up by like 20 seconds for the last mile because it was just really aggressive wind in the face, uphill. But I finished, and my husband and my dad were at the finish, and I am pleased to announce that my official finished time was 1 hour, 55 minutes, and 54 seconds. So I got my A goal, which is so crazy. Like, not only was it bitterly cold, like the coldest I've ever ran outside cold, but I was also sick. And like, I also have chronic bronchitis, which is a form of COPD. And so I was just so happy that that was the outcome. Like, my husband came around and gave me a hug. I went and picked up my medal. I got a pint glass. But yeah, it was amazing. It was such an awesome feeling crossing that finish line and knowing that all of the months of preparation that I've done have paid off in the form of that time. Now, after the race, we didn't stay very long, partially because we were traveling to my husband's parents' place later that morning, but also because as soon as I stopped and like I wasn't producing the same amount of heat anymore in my body, I got very dangerously cold. My husband wrapped a blanket around me, but I was still like uncontrollably cold, but it was worse than it was before I even started the race because I was a little bit sweaty. And so I was gonna stay for the award ceremony because I wanted to see, if I placed in any way. But I got to the point where I was like, I was drunk. I was so cold. And so we left, and I'm really glad that we did because when I hopped in the shower, when we got back here, my hands were white, like there was no blood in them, and my fingertips were pink. And so that's called frost nip, which is a precursor to frost bite. And so I think if I would have stayed outside for much longer, I think I would have legitimately been in danger. So I'm happy that we left when we did. Unofficially, I don't actually have the medal with me yet, so I can't officially say that I placed in my age group, but according to the race results on their website, I actually ended up getting third in my age group for the 20 to 24 year olds. And so I should be getting they call it a winner medal in the mail, since I wasn't able to pick it up in person. So that's really crazy too, that not only I achieved my goal, but I also finished in the top 3 in my age group. That's just crazy. Now, I will say it's not because my time was amazing. There are probably lots of people watching this who have run faster half marathons. This half marathon in particular is a lot smaller than some of the other popular ones that are run in my city. And also a lot of people didn't run because it was so cold. And so if I were to do it, in future years, I doubt I would place in the top 3 in my age group, but this was just sort of like the perfect scenario for me to have a chance at doing that. So that was my half marathon, and I can confidently say that my goal of falling in love with running again has been realized, which is amazing. What's next? I have a marathon in May. which is crazy. So, like 3 days ago, I was about to run a half marathon, and now I am officially training for a marathon. My plan is to document that process just like I've documented this process. But basically, what I did was I found a marathon program that had a half marathon race right in the middle. And so instead of starting over and doing, a 16 or 20 or 24 week marathon training program, I'm just doing like an 8-week half training block in order to prepare for the marathon. So I am already less than 2 months away from my next race, which is both very exciting and also nerve-wracking, because that thing that I did on Saturday, I have to do twice. But I don't have a timed goal really for the marathon. Maybe at some point I'll develop one, but right now the goal is to just finish the marathon. So stay tuned for updates and check-ins on that training process. But let me know if you have any races coming up, or if you have any questions about my training program or the race itself. I love running again, and I want to talk to people about it. So please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you later. Bye.